if we go a little closer, these little Chinese lantern type things. And you can see this one is nearly ripe. This pretty much stays in the lean-to all year round, and it's been doing fine. And I like to come here because I know that I can get a bit of fruit every so often. Hi guys, and welcome to We Sow. And on today's episode, I'm just going to give an update about what we're planning to do now that the season seems to be beginning to change. We're now in February and we've had a lot of snow in the UK, but for us locally, the snow has subsided and we're getting the signs that show us that we can start thinking about what we can start growing. So in this case, we are thinking about starting off some basil. And the reason is because basil is something which, if you give it the right care and the right pruning, hopefully you should be able to have a consistent supply of its leaves throughout the season. So we just want to get started by just planting some indoors, and then pending the weather, we'll look to transplant those plants outside into the allotment, possibly in the cold frame. In fact, yeah, definitely inside the cold frame. So we're just going to get started with that and see how it goes. So here you can see I've got my seed box, and this is what I use to keep a lot of my seeds organized. And you can see here that I've got them in all these different little envelopes, and I've got them labeled. I've written on them as well when things need to be sown out. And then what we have here is just the seedling tray. And what I'm going to do in this case is to just plant maybe half of this part of the tray with some normal sweet basil. And then I've also got some dark opal or red basil, which I'm going to plant on the other half. And I'm looking to just put in possibly about, I'd say 2 to 3 seeds per cell will do it. And the thing is, even if all 3 of them come up, you can still separate them when you're ready to plant out. So it's worth doing it that way. And so here, as you can see, with the basil that I mentioned, I've got my instructions on here, which I've written down. And I keep my seeds inside of this little plastic bag, which is resealable. And I find that these are quite good to get, especially if you're using things like Amazon. You can go online and look for these kind of seed bags, which is great because they're reusable. And I quite like using these because unlike when you buy them in the stores, a lot of times the bags they come in tend not to be as resealable. So I just quite like to just empty them out of whatever packaging I buy them with, and then I just put them inside these. So what I'm just going to do here now is, for the sweet basil, I'm just going to take about 2 or 3 seeds, shall I say, to put inside each hole. I've done maybe about 3 cells, so I'm just dropping them in. I've just dropped 3 in here. I've dropped another 3. And I'm just going to drop another 3 in here. And I'm just going to keep doing this until I get to halfway on my seedling tray. And I'm just going to keep going. So now I've just completed the first half, so I'm just going to do the same for the second half. So I'm just trying to put in about 3 or so into each hole. Because of the germination unpredictability, it's always good to just put a few more in each hole rather than just doing 1 per cell. So that's that row done. So I'm just going to keep going. So that's another 3. So now that my cells have had seeds put in them, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to cover over the little holes or impressions that I've made inside of the cell, just to kind of cover up the seeds. And yeah, this doesn't really take too long. It's not a precise art or anything. You just need to make sure that you close in some of the compost that's here, so that you can just close up the hole. And I'm just going to keep going with that. Okay, so that's nearly done. Okay, fantastic. So now all of those cells have been closed up. And so now the next thing is the water. Now for the water, I'm not going to put the water directly on the soil, or should I say on the soil which is inside the cell. Just going to lift off this portion of the seedling tray, because when you buy seedling trays, they typically come with this removable section, and then here is the base. And the idea is that you can do your watering in here. So what I do is I just put in the water. I know we put in maybe about an inch or so, or a bit more depending. And then now that that water's in there, I can literally just lower the cell into it, and then the water will actually be absorbed into the soil at a rate that the plants, or should I say that the seeds, will actually like. And then the next step is that you just have to cover these over. Now, come to think about it, although I have put the soil in at the bottom, sometimes what is good to do is that you could probably just spray in a little bit of water on the top. But we're mainly going to just rely on the water that's at the bottom of the cell in order to provide the moisture that's needed to start off the germination. Fortunately, what I have for this, or should I say for just spraying a little bit on the top just to dampen it a bit, is one of these, which is a pressure sprayer, and it has a pressure action, so you just need to pump. You could even pump maybe, once, but sometimes I just like to pump more than once. And then you have this handle, and then you can just press and you get a release of water. So I'm just doing that just to dampen the top a bit. And the good thing about these things is that you can actually turn the end of the nozzle, like the valve, to control how much water is actually coming out, or should I say the spray, so that it's not as, so that the amount of water coming out is less and is more like a spray. So for example, if I was to just turn this one here, you can see how that's changed as well. So that's perfect. So then the last step really is simply just to put on this lid, and this lid is just the incubation cover. So you put that on, and then it's just a case of putting this in a location that will have a good enough temperature. So I'd say room temperature will do it, and access to some light, and then hopefully within, I'd say maybe a few weeks, or maybe possibly a few days to a few weeks. It all just depends on how things go. Then you should begin to see some little sprouts coming up. And usually what I do with these is that I keep the incubation tray on it until the basil plants start to touch the ceiling or the roof of this, and then I remove that and allow them to grow a bit more. And then I'll keep an eye on the weather and just check to see what the general temperatures are. And then at that point, I can think about placing it in a cold frame out in the allotment. And so that's pretty much the general process of how we get our basil started. So fingers crossed, we'll see how this goes. And while we're here, I thought it might be worth just showing some of the other things I've got started off. So I've got quite a few pots here, as you can see. And these are currently in our lean-to. So what I have here are, I've got some Physalis plants, which are like the Cape gooseberry plants. You can probably see, if we go a little closer, these little Chinese lantern type things. And you can see this one is nearly ripe. This pretty much stays in the lean-to all year round, and it's been doing fine. And I like to come here because I know that I can get a bit of fruit every so often. And I have a few which I brought in from the allotment. So I planted some in the allotment, these ones here. And what I've done is, because I didn't want them to die during the winter, I just brought them inside. And they are quite good when it comes to low temperatures, but they definitely will die outside. So I did leave them in a lean-to. And whilst it was probably too cold for maybe some other plants, these do pretty well. So my plan is that I'm going to put these back into the allotment. Yeah, when the weather warms up a bit. And the good plan with this as well is that, you know, although these plants can grow quite big, what I can do is I can get my harvest off of them. And then if I just take some cuttings, I can then root those by literally just cutting off maybe the tops of these and placing them directly into the soil, making sure that I keep the soil moist, and eventually they do root. In fact, this is how these came about. I actually cut them off of this plant. And interestingly enough, when I put these plants into potting soil, they weren't really rooting and many of them were dying, and I was just like, what is going on? So what I did instead was I just decided, if I put them in the pots for a bit and then just put them straight in the allotment and just water them regularly, like, you know, very regularly, see what happens. And for some reason, once in the allotment, they started to take root. But I mean, I don't think it means that you can't root them in potting soil, because for example, this plant, this one here, accidentally snapped off of the mother. I've put it in and it did actually grow. Maybe there was just something wrong with my soil, but yeah, so the plan is I will just put these in the allotment, and hopefully we should be able to get fruit throughout the season off of these Physalis plants. And if they are growing too big, I'll just take another cutting, pop it into the soil right next to the main plant, and then take in that cutting as the season comes to an end, so that I can overwinter maybe 5 or 6 plants, and then just keep doing the process over again. That way I won't have to keep on saving seed and having to start the process, because these can take a very long time to germinate. And yeah, lastly, with these pots that I showed just a second ago, what is in here are tomato seeds, and I've got different varieties of tomatoes. I'm really bad because I don't label everything, but I do know roughly what's in them. So I do know I've got some black tomatoes inside this one, and then in here is a mixture of different tomatoes. And so what I'm going to do is I put far too many in them, but what I'm going to do is I'll take maybe half and give them away, because for example, my dad, he likes to grow tomatoes and he never starts them from seed, so I always give him mine. So I've planted extra here. I know that I'll have the yellow variety in here, and then I've got single varieties in each of these pots. I can't remember which ones they are, but it doesn't matter as long as I make sure that I keep the plants from there and put them next to each other and stuff, then that should be fine. And then here I did put in some aubergines. I tried to overwinter the aubergines, the plants that I had growing from last year. That didn't work because obviously it's too cold in here, and unfortunately in our house, even though it's warmer, there just wasn't any windowsill space for me to put them where they could get enough light, so I just started some new ones. And then here's just some pepper plants. I've not done great with keeping my peppers alive, because normally I like to overwinter my pepper plants by digging them up at the end of the season. And last year I kept them in the lean-to and it was absolutely fine. But this time around, we had such a cold winter that quite a lot of the plants died, and I don't have infinite space to just put them all over the house, so I just had to leave them out in here. But what I've done is there's about maybe 3 of them which have kind of survived, but there aren't any leaves on them, so I'm just going to see whether they recover, because they sometimes almost seem like they're dead, or you know, they just don't have leaves and then they just need a bit of time to recover. So what I'm doing is I've brought those inside in the little space that we have, but I've just started off some new seeds in here. And although in an ideal world I would start, you know, some of these things off inside the actual house where it's warmer, again, space is a factor why I'd rather just leave them in the lean-to, because I know that once the temperatures become more consistent, it won't take for them long to start growing. So yeah, so I just hope that what I've shared about these is something that you guys will find useful. So thanks again for checking out today's episode. Do like, comment and subscribe, and I hope that what we've shared is something that you'll find useful. Take care. Bye.